You never want to hear a human say, oops, especially if that oops is followed by the fast footfalls of a human running away from something. Most times, however, it is enough to pause and look at the human, as it can be as innocuous as knocking over something or accidentally dropping something. Yet sometimes that oops can nearly lead to a species extinction, or, if nothing else, embarrassment. This was the case as the humans met the first envoy from the core species. The reptilian species, which shaped mostly like human, which they call humanoid, called the Schnick, landed many of their ships near the largest population center they could find on the planet. This was a good idea, as most, but not all, around 61%, would not put other humans in danger willingly. Realizing, though, the contaminants in the atmosphere near this population center, they traveled to another city on the other side of the planet to another population center. The Schnicht apologized about this later, but no one seemed to really care. After the typical tensions associated with first contact, negotiations could start in earnest. The translators had much difficulty with the myriad of languages that this world offered. Still, everything progressed smoothly, as this world will be the first level 9 Death World species that is still alive. As it turns out, all other Death Worlds above level 2 have lost all sentient and sapient life. There are a myriad of factors why, but they're not applicable to Earth and its humans. As negotiations with all the different cultures and governments continued, the Schnick began to run low on their foodstuffs as they didn't think it would take this long. This would allow the humans to show off their culinary skills, yet they still had to worry about other biological factors. Every culture of human took a collective sigh of relief, though, as they found out that the Schnick are omnivorous as well as the humans. Unfortunately, a quick look at the alien food found many things lacking. In particular, spices were almost non existent in their diet. This is a double edged sword, as it meant that they could feed their new friends, but humanity had to serve very, very bland food. Well, at least by human standards, that is. This went fine, and the Schnick found items like rice and crickets to suit them well. One of the most viewed videos ever on this subject was the delegation complimenting how plain white rice was so flavorful to them. Confused the hell out of all the humans. In addition of insects as a protein source made them all practically gorge themselves on each meal as they thought it was a true delicacy. This caused no issues, and everything seemed fine, at least until the Schnick were invited to a military banquet. The local brigade combat team had recently returned, and tradition is to have a formal event. An event that most enlisted personnel despise so much that they would show up drunk beforehand and stay lit up like Vegas just to stomach the bullshit of having to be there in their dress uniform. In this particular case, the men refused to attend, stating, "We're not eating the fucking bugs." This blatant refusal got the chain of command to at least have the human option on the menu. During the meal, a few of the Joes pulled out their own seasonings that they brought with them, as there wasn't anything, even salt, on the tables to use. They began using everything they brought, from salt to Tabasco. The smell of the spices carried across the room to the delegation. The chain of command apologized profusely, but the delegation found it intoxicating. As the formal dinner began to wind down, the delegation tried something the humans called dancing, which was a disaster at first. Many of the delegations headed to the enlisted and asked to try a few of their spices out, seeing they couldn't dance for anything. The soldiers agreed, but warned the delegation that it might be a bit too much, a little too flavorful, a little too much punch, as they would say. Each of these spices made the delegation tingle with delight as they wanted to try different items. In particular, black pepper, saffron, honey, and Tabasco made the delegation particularly giddy. About 30 minutes after consumption of these items, weird things started happening. Many of the delegation began to hit the dance floor and really started to move and bust a move all over the place. Others started slurring their speech and leaning on everyone for support. It's like they were totally fried. The weirdest thing that happened was about an hour to 2 hours after having something spicy, all the schnick females seemed to disappear. It's like somebody just blinked and they were gone. The males were having too much fun to notice and still turned out to be one hell of a party. The next morning, however, was another story. Those that had danced the night away were so sore they could barely move at all. Many felt even worse due to the high amount of food still inside their systems. What was worse for them was the fact that their bodies needed to release pressure. Turns out, a schnick burp can, in fact, break glass. Turns out, if it was just a burp, everybody was lucky. Many had to run to the water closet as mass began to eject itself from them involuntarily, just more of a suddenly fashion. The phrase, "My tail is melting off," was echoed several times across the post as they had to deal with the consequences of overindulgence. The strangest item was the female schnick. As it turned out, capsaicin puts them into heat. It's a false heat, but heat nonetheless. It doesn't matter the species, sex, or even number of partners in a row or together. The urges of the females were just too strong to ignore. As it turns out, schnick have their own version of walk of shame, and everyone got a chance to see it. The delegation thought this would be a black mark and a breakdown of everything. They figured their record was completely toast and they wouldn't be able to get any sort of respect from the humans, yet the humans didn't look poorly on them. When the delegation command asks, "How could such an incident take place?" the humans simply said, "Accidents happen." Or they would simply hear the human saying, "Oops." This was the first time the galaxy at large would be given the human word. That particular oops led to the schnick becoming frightened of humans, yet the oops allowed them to see each other with flaws, and seeming to grow together in spite of said flaws. So sometimes oops can lead to something positive, yet you should still be afraid of a human saying oops. We all know what happened when human engineers on Twycross said oops and nearly blew the planet out of orbit. Or the time a human diplomat said oops when they nearly started the third interstellar war over just mispronouncing a word. While you're out in the ether, if you end up working with humans, just remember that there are a few things to remember to do if a human says oops. Depending on the severity, you can simply call them a derogatory term, or strike them hard enough that they learn their lesson not to make the same mistake again. You can also laugh at the idiocy of the situation. But above all else, if you hear a human say oops and start running, run away faster.